Just when you thought we were done covering the financials from Nintendo and the huge success of the Switch 2 and still the Switch 1, as it has just seemingly beaten the Nintendo DS in terms of sales, they came out with this, which has a few more details on the fiscal year as well as their overall guidance as a company, like what their principles and goals are, that while there isn't anything too earth-shattering here, there were still a few tidbits that stood out to me. So let's go over them real quick as we scroll through this very long document, which I'll link to in the description below if you want to check it out for yourself. But of course, they do tout the success of the Switch 2, confirming again it's by far the best-selling Nintendo platform within its first 4 months. They go over some of the numbers we already talked about, a few more beyond it. However, one thing that stood out to me is this section right here where they say, going forward, we will shift our primary development focus to Nintendo Switch 2 and expand our business around this new platform. So yeah, in case there was any doubt, Switch 2 is obviously their major new platform moving forward, perhaps suggesting even more so than it may have already been. We already know there's still some upcoming Nintendo Switch games, including Metroid Prime 4, Tomodachi Life, and whatever the other game is, I can't remember off the top of my head. Oh, Rhythm Heaven, of course. So it makes me wonder if maybe we're not going to see too much more in the way of releases for Switch 1 beyond this, as it seems like they are shifting focus to Switch 2, which makes sense given the recent sales numbers, and they're trying to convert as many people as possible. Which, by the way, I believe it's around, they say in this report, 84% of people that bought Switch 2 are coming directly from Switch 1. So that makes sense, obviously, but I also can't help but wonder if Nintendo's hoping to broaden that even more beyond, beyond Switch 1 owners. But still, good numbers all around regardless. However, it's not over for Switch 1, because if you keep on scrolling down here, they do talk about, actually they also talk about the huge success of Mario Kart World and how they expect it to be an evergreen title that'll last for years to come, obviously. But they do talk about going back to Nintendo Switch, and that is how they're not done with it entirely in terms of hardware manufacturing, because they say that while our business will shift to Nintendo Switch 2, Nintendo Switch has maintained a steady sales pace even after the June launch of its successor. While taking consumer demand in the business environment into consideration, we will continue sales of Nintendo Switch hardware. So they're basically saying as long as people keep buying them, we're going to keep making them. And thankfully, because I know I'm not alone in wanting to see someone take the crown from PlayStation 2 after all these decades. So we'll see if it's Nintendo Switch or not, but it seems like Nintendo's going to do their part in helping that to happen. Okay, continuing on, they talk more about their business goal to create smiles through entertainment, which we've heard before, especially from, I believe, like Iwata. They also talk about two of the key principles for their business activities being growing the Nintendo IP fan base, as well as fostering long-term relationships with consumers. Then they go into the specifics of how they do this. And one of the manners in which they do this is, of course, through movies and other new types of media. So let me go and scroll down to the movie section, because there was something that stood out to me that was interesting here, being this, where they talk about the success of the Mario movie and how it, brought different generations of gamers together, or of Mario fans, I should say, including a really cute quote here. From someone who said, I was able to cheer for the same Mario I played with in games as a child, but this time in the movie theater as a parent of my own kids. And the president goes on to talk about how they were grateful for that message. So that's really cute. But what I want to focus on is this interesting image right here, where they talk about they're building a framework for a consistent release cadence, specifically calling out the current cadence being 2023 for the first Mario movie, 2026 for the second one, and then 2027 for the Zelda movie. But then they tease a future of not just one title, but two titles, 2 question marks there, along with the ... implying, more to come. And they even specifically state that we're continuing to prepare for the ongoing release of movies in the future. But this image is really making me think that they probably have at least 2 movies already kind of locked in for those future releases, hence why they put 2 there. Again, it could mean nothing, but then of course they're hinting at a future beyond that. But furthermore, the fact that they specifically mentioned release cadence, and we're now looking at a current cadence of one every year between the latest 2 movies being Mario Galaxy movie in 2026 and the Zelda movie in 2027, it's making me think we may be seeing movies in 2028 and maybe 2029 as well. And, well, what could they be? There have been rumors of course, a Donkey Kong spin-off movie, which could be perfect for maybe a 2028 release, or perhaps 2029, with something else filling in the other one of that question mark. So we'll have to wait and see. I don't know what they could be beyond that, but, I'm excited to find out, and really am hoping that they get to a yearly, if not bi-yearly, schedule, because that would be really exciting. Alright, continuing on, there wasn't a whole lot more else that really stood out to me beyond, focusing talk about the apps a little bit in the recent release of Fire Emblem Shadows. They talk about Nintendo Today, though they don't really mention any, download numbers for that one, probably because they weren't too impressive, but to be fair, they didn't really talk about that for most of their general purpose apps, from what I can tell. And yeah, that is pretty much it. They do talk about Super Nintendo World and how they'll be opening up a new one at Singapore soon enough, but beyond that, they don't mention anything else in the future cards for the parks. So we may not be seeing any Nintendo World expansions anytime soon beyond Singapore. But yeah, again, though, they're not really announcing any major things here either. But just want to throw that out there. And then, of course, they do talk about the recent introduction of My Mario and how this is being used as a way of reaching, again, different demographics, such as young children in this case. So again, if you want to read all this for yourself, I'll link to it below. There are some, other fascinating tidbits in here, but I think we touched on the big ones. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you think of everything, including the Switch continuing onward to a degree, the focus switching to Switch 2, and also what you think those movie projects could be, if anything. Thanks for watching, everyone. Catch you later. Bye.